I had lunch. I'm back. I had scrambled eggs. I was hungry. Now, so we understand why this function doesn't necessarily work. Not this function, where is it? This total registration function, this function. What's the issue with it? That it's difficult if I were to just do an if statement here. So if I did if check t against what? AGA INST against what, right? What do I check t against? I can't because there's no way for me to grab the class name from an individual registration object. At least the way we are handling objects at the moment. If we go back to my registration list.h to the header file, you notice that I inherit from QObject. And in reality, I don't really need to do that. I can get rid of that because I'm not doing any public, I'm not doing any signal sort functionality, nor am I seeking to find out any meta information. So I don't really need to inherit from QObject. If I go back into my main file, and if I just do a control S everywhere, and if I come back here and I do a control B to build, it should build perfectly fine. Nothing should be different. Well, things are different, but nothing affecting it. This one, yeah, but that's fine. It should still run. I'll fix that later. And if we run this, we go to application output, and there we go. Everything still works, which is great. I'll end this little application output area, and I'll close that window. If we go back here to the requirements, it tells us that we are expected to use the Qt's meta object system. Meta in this context means information. Meta information is information about information. So what you typically do is you inherit publicly from the meta object. Once you do so, you will then have access to information about information. Well, what information? You will have access to information about your class. This may be a little weird to wrap your head around the first time you hear it. It was definitely difficult for me to grasp the concept, but I will explain it in a few seconds. I just need to check something. I need to go ahead and open my GitHub here and just see how I did last time. Just then I don't have to go read all the docs again. And it should be software here. It's that one. Okay, cool. So let me come back into my Qt creator and I'll go to registration. And instead, if I inherit publicly from here, so if I do public QObject, and if I just come down here and I do QObject, when you do not specify under which scope you are placing a method or a member, by default this is private scope, okay? So this QObject is under private scope. Now you can copy it and place it in private, but typically the standard is just to place it out here on its own. And by default, again, it's private. If this were a struct, by default it would be public. So cool, we have this QObject. Now I just want to try something. Now typically we will add a few more details below it, some getters and some setters using something called QProperty. But I don't want to do that. I just want to check if I can do something else. And if I can do it, then there'll be no need for me to set up getters or setters. And there's only one way for me to do that. Let me go into my registration CPP, and I'll go into the constructor, and I just want to check something. Do I have QDebug anywhere? I don't have QDebug. Okay, so I'll just bring QDebug here. QDebug. So I'm just going to write some code and then I'll explain when I'm done. If I do this, and if I can do that, can I just grab the property? Cool, I can grab a property. That's what I want. Actually, I don't want to do that. How am I going to do this? This refers to the current instance that's being created, right? I should be able to grab there we go, a meta object. I should be able to do that. Let me just assign this to be the value of something. So const QMetaObject. I don't think I need to include this anywhere, and I'll just call this meta object. A meta object is an information object, okay? Because meta in the sense just means information. Information object. This will give me information. Value stored to meta object during its initialization is never read. Okay, cool. And I should be able to do a qdebug. And class name. Cool. And this can do a new line. Alright. So let's go into my main. This should print, well, you can see what it does, but call to virtual method during construction. Bypass. Warning. Call to virtual function registration meta object during construction bypasses virtual dispatch. I don't think this is a big issue. Let me just go into my main. I'll build here. I'll save all. Let's see. Building is taking some time, so again, that's typically a good sign unless it's picking up like 100 errors. No errors, just a no return statement. That's cool, that's great. And I'll just do Control R. I'll go into application output, and here we go. Class name registration, class name registration. So what happened here? In my registration header file, I am inheriting from something called a QObject. And if I hit F1, it should take some time, but it should pull up this helpful menu on the right corner here. There we go. I'm just going to bring this down. We see that the QObject class is the base class of all QObjects. Now, right now, all the classes that I've been writing, they are composed of types that are only found in Qt, like QString, QDate, like these aren't standard C++. However, these classes themselves are not Q classes. They regular C++ which use some values and some types found in Qt. Once I inherit from QObject, I'm inheriting from the base or the parent class of all other QObjects. And the thing about Qt objects is that they have more information apart from that which is found in their class definition, declaration, and signature. They have information that can be found at runtime, such as their class name, their is it superclass? I think so. So let me go back here and go into registration and just do this. Should be able to find a few more. Superclass, right? I should get that. And if I do Control B, just going to Control R. And we get all these class names that just refer to some memory location. So if I do this, invalid operations. That's weird. If it's a class name, and if it's a time memory location, I should be able to deallocate. Invalid operands to binary expression qdebug. Oh wait, so dot superclass class info. I could be confusing myself. Okay, anyway. So all of these point to the same area in memory, and they all have the same class name registration, which is good because we know that we should in some way count the number of registration classes. However, I also have a student registration and a guest registration. So when they are created, they inherit from the registration. Registration itself inherits from QObject. But why is it that when I try to access information about them, they also call the parent class, which is registration, instead of calling their own individual class? And that's the issue that we need to figure out. Because if it were just this, and if I got the classes that I needed, all would be fine, right? But I'm having an issue. It shouldn't only be registration. It should also be student registration, and I think I have one guest registration. So what's going on here? Short answer is I have no idea. This behavior is something that I haven't really worked with before. So if I cut that, right? And I'm just going to... What if I just did it here? Okay. What if I just did it here? When in my toString method. And if I go to my main, and if I just do one of them, I'll do it up here. QDebug reg1 dot toString. I'll just do a new line, okay? And I'll do this for my student and for my guest. And guest. I'll do a Control B to build. And a Control R to run. And yet again, I'm only getting the base class, which is registration. Now, student reg and guest registration are registration objects, but they should not be calling this. So, QObject and let's go look at some of the things that I have. Class name. My mistake. QMetaObject. QMetaObject. I enjoy watching horror movies, and I tend to get more feelings of uneasiness from watching paranormal horror movies like The Conjuring, Insidious, movies of that nature, as opposed to watching horror movies that are set in a more realistic setting, such as, say, what's a more realistic one? Like Hush, that's about a serial killer trying to kill someone. Something else like Saw. The later Saws are pretty weird, but the earlier Saws, like, yeah, that could definitely happen to someone. Movies of that nature. Or even something like Texas Chainsaw Massacre. You know, you have like just a murdering psychopathic family. Like, these are far more probable events, as opposed to something like Insidious and, say, Conjuring. And yet I can watch 10 of those in a day and I won't care. If I watch one paranormal movie, an event that will never occur, I'm shivering my timbers. And I need to put my laptop on charge. Okay, now, it could be a few reasons, because obviously you would know if you were ever in a situation where some psychopath was trying to kill you, as opposed if you were attempting to get possessed by something. With a given index, I'm going to go to the QMetaObject, and let me just look around. Class info, class name, returns the class name, also superclass, returns the meta object of the superclass, or null pointer if there is no such object. Uh, hmm. Unless I'm going to have to go into my individual student registration. Let me go to registration, right? And what if I just went ahead and I call them here. I just go ahead and I redefine these, right? And if I do a control B and I do a run, I now get registration, registration, registration. So still no difference, which is very weird. Dude, you are not called registration, you are called guest registration. Well, even though you inherit, I know you inherit from this, but you shouldn't uh, be referring to yourself as registration if you clearly are not a registration object. You are a student. Constructor returns the metadata for the constructor with the given index, an integer index. So that won't really help me. Let's go. A detailed description, okay. It's as follows. The cute, by the way, let me, this is not qt. This is equal to cute, okay? Cute. The same way this is not equal to popsicle, it is popsicle. Wait, popsicle. How do you spell popsicle? Sickle? No. I don't think popsicle is spelled that way. Popsicle. Popsicle? I think that's how I spell popsicle, but yeah. Anyway, so the Qt's meta-object system in Qt is responsible for the signal and slots inter-object communication mechanism, right? It's also used for runtime type information. It depends on the context. I'm not talking to you guys, I'm actually messaging someone. Depends on the rapid change. Depends on the rapid change. Cool. Okay, back to the video. So it's responsible for the signal and slots inter-object communication mechanism, and that makes sense because if I didn't have this public Q object, and if I didn't include a Q object here, and if I tried to use signal and slots, it just wouldn't work. It's also important for the runtime type information, so get information during runtime, and the Qt property system. When we mean properties, we mean these are properties, okay? The attributes and methods of your class are your properties. A single QMetaObject instance is created for each QObject subclass that is used in an application, okay? I have a timer going on for 30 minutes, that should be fine. And that one instance stores all the meta information for the QObject subclass. It's also available as QObject MetaObject, okay? Let's see. The functions that are most likely useful are class name, superclass, method, method count, enumerator, enumerator count, property, constructor, and constructor count. The index functions, index of constructor, map, name of constructors to indexes the meta object, okay. And yet for some reason, I'm getting an issue here. Let's see, what else the docs have to say that may be helpful to me. Let me go here. I'm just gonna go here, and for some weird reason, This is my current instance, okay? And I grab the meta object associated with it, okay? I then go ahead and I grab the class name associated with it, which will be registration for registrations, but it should not be registration for objects that are not registration, even if they inherit from it. So this is the problem here. Let's see if I can grab more information. Where's the application? Am I? Let me just run this again. Yeah, I am getting the same thing. So registration, registration, registration. When that is not the case, something wrong there. I'll just stop that and I'll close this. Where's the QMetaObject structure? Uh, I have, oh, by the way, if you didn't include QMake or CMake, then you wouldn't be able to use your mock. Mock or MOC is your meta object compiler. I think the biggest issue I'm having is that within these, I should also, since they are themselves inheriting from registration, I need to pass them their own Q object so they have information about themselves. That seems like a good try. I'll save all, and let's see if you build. And I may have just write an override here. Now if I do a control R, hey, there we go. Registration, student registration, and guest registration. So that's fine. Then why was I searching override? By default, if it's there, it's overriding it. If I have a virtual function, but this is not a virtual function, so there's no need for me to override. So, okay, cool. So I now know that I can grab the name from a specific meta object. So if I go into my registration list, let me try for when I'm adding an object. I'm just going to do qdebug r.getAttendee dot I'm forgetting what it is. I need to grab the meta object, okay. So dot meta object. Wait, wrong thing. It's from r directly dot get no meta object. What is happening? Meta object, right? Dot class name, and I'm just going to do a new line here. I'm just going to do, and I'll just do, just to make it clear, before adding a registration object, right? I'm going to do Control B to build, and I'll do a Control R to run. And if I come up here, before adding a registration object registration, before adding the registration object registration, and before adding a registration object registration. Now, there's a little issue with that. If I go back to my main, registration, add registration, I should not be getting registration. I should be getting registration, student, and guest registration as it is here and here. But I'm just getting registration, which somewhat makes sense because I'm stating my registration list only takes in registration objects. So it somewhat makes sense. I'm about to be as cooked as South Africa was during this last T20 when they played India. Damn you, Bumrah. Let's see. So, okay, so if I make you inherit publicly from Q object, okay? And if I were to call Q underscore object, Q object, and if I do a control B now, and if I do a run after you're done building, let's see if I have better success. No, I don't have better success because you still say registration, but you shouldn't say that. You should say student and guest registration. Let's see. So that's gonna be a little difficult. So that's my next, well, that's my current issue. I can get it to display the necessary information needed in each registration type. However, in registration list, so here, I'm still having that issue. Let's go back to my diagram. And this is a registration object, and registration itself can be of three types: a regular, a student, and a guest. Destructor is registered total fee. That's going to be annoying. Total registrations. These two. Wait a minute. I have two functions I didn't do. Total fee. Oh yeah, I'm still doing total fee. I'll come back to that. So, total fee and total registration. And registration. I wonder. I really wonder. And these add QObject, right? That makes sense because the class is registration and the class that inherits from is QObject. So why don't I do class name, and can I from here can I pull dot super? I can't do anything more from here because you are basically the last level of abstraction class. So that's a little issue. R is my registration object. Meta object is how I gather information from that object. So what if I just did superclass, right? That will have to just give me registration again. I'll do that to control R. And before adding a registered object, it just gives me this memory location, which is just Q object's location in memory. Clearly. Dot class info class info count, class name index of static constructor. Inherits. None of these really seem to be helpful to me. So you are the problem, right? Let's consult Doctors Google. Doctors Google just seems confused. Let me see. QObject in child classes. There's something on Stack Overflow. Is there a way to find the QMetaObject instance of a class given the class name? What I like or would like to do is to load objects from disk, but for this to happen, I need to find a way to retrieve a QMetaObject instance using the name of a class in order to use the QMetaObject to create an instance. You should be able to do this using QMetaType. That does not seem to be it. Let's see. Let me go into my main and let me do this. Let me directly make these into two pointers, okay? And I'll do new student registration, right? And I'll do the same thing here, right? New. And I think I know what the problem is. P1 and P2 should not be able to be added because they are the same. They're the same object as registration 1. So that could be an issue. Cannot initialize a parameter. Oh yeah, that makes sense because these should just be directly called. Yeah. So I'll first try this and I'll save it. Student dot toString and guest. Control B to build. So as you notice, when there's errors, it typically catches it incredibly fast, but if it's building successfully, it typically takes a second. I do Control R to run. If I come up here, I still get registration, which I think makes sense. And the reason why I think it makes sense is because I'm adding the same object. Because as the requirement states, do not allow registration that has the same name and same email, regardless of what anything else is, right? So let me create another one. And I'll create a new person here actually. I'll person, and I'll create one right here, and I'll say, not Bob, let's do, I was thinking of a cool name, but I can't spell the name that I wanted to think of, so let's do something like Wallace, you know, Wallace and Gromit. Wallace. I don't want insert, dude. So Wallace. And what else does the person need? They need an affiliation. You can also go to uni, and I'll give you some email. Wallace at wg.com. And I created a new person there. If I do Control B to run, Control B to build, and if I do Control R to run, registration, still registration. I get 3 unis. Wallace uni, and there's his information. That did not work. So the problem isn't me creating a direct pointer. The problem isn't me creating a different person entirely. So, what can I do? Let me think. QMetaObject. Let's go back to the docs and see if I find anything there. Okay, QMetaObject. It doesn't appear as though I have what I need, but let's just check it out. Oh, it doesn't seem like anything helpful in this direct documents. Maybe Stack Overflow. That could work. So typically, when you do inheritance in most, not most, I would say at least C++, it doesn't automatically change the name of the subclass. It will typically keep that name, but it'll extend the behavior. So by calling QObject in my child classes, I'm saying, hey, now refer to your own name. However, it should also be reflecting in my registration list, because the registration list actually, why don't I go here and I call R, which is the registration object, right? And if I just call the QToString method, and let's just do that, right? Dot toString, okay? Control B, Control R, application output. And before adding a registration object, but under student registration, I need to make this a lot clearer, okay? Before adding a registration object, I have this, and I have the class name registration, okay? And then I cannot add with the same email address, okay? Do I see guest registration anyway? Yeah. Registration, student registration, student registration. And you get guest registration down here, so okay, I need to get rid of I'm gonna go to this main. I'm just going to all of just leave, okay? Just leave. I need to make this clearer. Control B to build. And I'll run this. And here we go. Class name is registration, the super class name, and then I get the before adding a registration object. So this was first called, and that's correct because Azura is a registration object. And then when I try to add one that's the same, I get the correct user response that states I can't do it, which is fine. And then before adding another object, Wallace is a student, so this is correct. That's right. And then again, I'm trying to add. That's why guest wasn't showing up. I see. Okay. So that's why guest wasn't showing up because again, guest happens to be where are you? Guest here is just P1 and P1 is already been created. So I'll have to create another one. I'll have to come here and I'll have to do person. The guest is Liu Kang from Mortal Kombat. I'm sure it's pretty sure that's how you spell his name. And he's going to go to Mortal Kombat, MK, and his email is LK Liu Kang at mk1.com. Cool. And now if I do Control B to build and do Control R to run, I go to application output. I now get, there we go, guest registration, and this is before adding the object. Right, that's correct, that works. So, using this knowledge, how can I go in registration list and how can I just grab that one value? Well, I have been told I can add more values if I want. So why don't I? Why don't I? It's a string, right? It's just a Q string. Q string, my class name. Yes, I added this to make my life easier. Now, uh, why did everything change color all of a sudden? My class name, anyway. So if I go here, and why don't I, when I'm creating it, I just to make it clear, Control C, my class name. I'm gonna go into my registration. I'm just gonna pass in this dot meta object dot class name. Missing between members or between base member initializers. What are you talking about, dude? I have that little thing there. What do you mean? Oh, there. Cool. So instead of all of this, can I just try? And I'm gonna get rid of this. I don't need the super. I don't need that. And I don't need that either. I'm just gonna try to do my m underscore my class name. And this should work because I'm inheriting this in student and in guest. It will, oh, but it'll be called by them. Yeah, so this will not work actually. So that does not work as intended. Let me go back here and I'll get rid of it. Let me go back to that main and let me just run this again. It's building, it's taking time. There we go. Registration, student, and guest. Show. When I add a registration object, what I can do is, because only when I'm adding it, oh, okay, there we go. I can grab that. There's an issue. Let's go here. I'll get rid of this. So let me think. Stretch. These are the type of questions that you will ask to ChatGPT and it will get it wrong. I wonder, what horror movie do I want to watch later today? You know, every time I open up YouTube, I'll get news from both sides of the spectrum, one being like pro for something, one being against it, and both are just wrong. Statistical inference just does not find its way in common news sources. Now, let's see. I can go to my registration list, and here I can call the toString method, and the toString method effectively returns a correct class name using the MetaObject system. That's correct. However, I need a way for me to be able to store each occurrence of a specific class name so that I can use it to count the number of total fees and to determine the total number of registrations for a specific registration type. And the issue I'm having is that for some reason, apart from the toString function, it does not work in the constructor, and there's no point of me creating them here. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. I think I may have got it, because if I add a software read, it's like a QString software read, software write, I will have to pass in 3 parameters: 1 the type, 2 the read function, and 3 the set function. But then the issue is these are properties that are found within QObject. There is no point of me to rewrite them, because if I were to be allowed to just write them, if I come here, I wouldn't be given this, because I could just use a set method, and when I create an instance of a given object, I can just write its class name. However, it tells me here that I am expected to use the MetaObject system to access the type of registration in registration list. To access the type of the registration object, which is one of 3, but I must do it in registration list. So that's where the issue lay. There is one more thing that I can try off the top of my head. I can go into registration list. I can get rid of this. I don't need that anymore, just to confirm that it works to some capacity. I can go to total fee. I'm just going to return total fee for now, okay? Total fees, I'm just going to do that. And then I can say qdebug m underscore, I have so many more assignments to do, dude. M underscore I to grab a specific registration dot meta object dot class name. And this is where we will see the true performance caliber of C++ and Qt. So now if I go into my main, and if I just come down here, I'm going to do qdebug my registration list dot total fee, and I'll just pass in all just for placeholder purposes. And I will just do Control B to build, Control R to run. And if I come down here, I get registration, student registration, guest registration, registration, and registration, which just happens to be correct because that's one successful, that's two successful, and that's three successful. And then, no, it's one successful. This is no longer a copy. This is its own, and this is also no longer a copy. So I should be 1, should be 2, should be 3, should be 4 and 5. I should have 1 registration, 1 student, 1 guest, 2 registration, 3 registration. And let's just make sure that it is correct. I'll save all. This should build. It's taking more than a few milliseconds, which again, as I said, is good news. 1, 2, 3 as stated, and then student, and then guest. And there we go. We may have just attained a small piece of nirvana. Very nice. I will now go into my registration list. I'm just going to reduce these in size. Right, and I'll get rid of all the comments when I'm at least done with the majority of the code. Just want some space there. And I can grab the class name. And if I look at my total fees function, it states I should be able to request the total registration fees for a type, registration, student registration, guest registration, or all. So what I should do is when I add the registration, I should be able to do the exact same thing as I did here, but I'll do it as soon as I effectively add the object, so I know the object does exist. Right, I'll come here and I'll do it here. M underscore attendee list. I pass in an object called R, so it's going to be the topmost element, so I can get rid of this. Okay, do I just have access to dot top, dot front, and let me just see dot front. It return. What does it return? Let me go to my queue list. Queue list. Moments like this, I would much rather be chased by, who's this little one? Yeah, I'd much rather be chased by Jason than having to go through the dock so many times. You know what I want? You know what I really want? I want a nice comfy chair, which I unfortunately do not have. But that would be cool. Let's see. Okay, and I want the front. What does front function do? the front function, if it returns a reference, which means I mean front, if it returns a reference, it means it returns a memory address, which, no, when I add an object, do I add it to the front or do I add it to the back? Dot last, right? Dot last dot MetaObject dot class name. I just want to make it clear that I'm doing this. I just added an object. Control B. And then Control R. I just added an object student registration, guest registration, registration. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And there we go, gentlemen. It's all coming together piece by piece. I wonder what happens if I watch just do dot first. Because that's always going to refer to my first one, right? Like the first in my queue list, not the last that's been added. Yeah, this one just refers to my first object, so I was right in making the call to dot last. I will get rid of that. I'll just close it and I'll do another build. As you can see in the panel over here, you also have your build, your debug, and your run buttons. And there we go. So what I'm thinking is the total fee must return the total amount paid for registration list for the given types registration, student registration, guest registration, and the sum of all three if the type is all. So what I can do is, why don't I just, because I'm allowed to do it, right, according to the documents, if I just go ahead here and I integer m underscore registrations default, what was it called? I'm forgetting. I'm allowed to have three types, so no, standard registration, okay, standard registration. So I will call you int m underscore standard registration. I'm going to create two more. Standard registration, student registration, and finally guest registration, right? I will then go into my constructor, and which thankfully I have created just in case I need this. M underscore standard registration, and I'll pass in the value of 0. I'll also do M underscore student registration. I'll pass in that 0, and I'll do M underscore guest registration, also pass in 0. Okay. And now that I think about, these names aren't very descriptive. Standard registration, M underscore standard registrations, student registrations, guest registration, registered. I think registered just sounds better. M standard registered number, student registered number. I need a better name. I need to think. I need a better name. The name I need is something that reflects the number of occurrences for a given registration type. Number of students registered, that's too long. Number, yeah, that's not, it's descriptive, but it's too long. Standard registration just seems too short. Student registration, students registered, standard registered. I think registered just sounds better. Registered. Standard registered, student registered, and guest registered. If I go back here into my registration list, and let me check something, if I can actually just fix it here. If I go to refactor, generate setter, generate constant Q property, no, that's cool, but I don't need that. So I have to do it manually. Okay, cool. And then whenever I add a class, so if, and I'm just going to grab this, I'll cut it out and I'll just get rid of this entirely, is equal to registration. In that case, I want m underscore standard registered plus equal to 1, else if is equal to student registration student registered plus equal to 1, else, because you only want to get 3, right? And I'll do the all, that's just the aggregation of all, else m underscore guest registered plus equals 1. Standard registered, student registered, guest registered. Standards, no, it's standard registers, registered. Standard registered, student registered, guest registered. Right, so I'll add the values if need be. And why am I getting an issue here? Result of the comparison against a string is unspecified. What do you mean it's unspecified? Semantic issue. Result of comparison against a string literal is unspecified. Use an explicit string comparison function instead. It's because class name returns a constant, so do you have a quick fix for me? I'm just gonna have to like copy that to my clipboard and paste it into Google because I don't feel like it's gonna be the .find.equal QString. There's some function, I don't remember how it's called. Oh, I think I know what it's called. It returns a const char. So what I should do is I'll create, for the moment, I'll create a Q string, right? And I'll just check if that value is equivalent. Wait, should be registration or registered. Registration. And then student registration. So student registration. Right. Let me, is there an issue with this? Where's my VS Code? It's sometimes difficult to read with this bright setting, I should say. something. Oh, okay. So it states that if it's equals, it returns 0, and otherwise it returns 1. And I'm just gonna have to, I'm gonna make these public just so that I can grab them for now, right? I'm just gonna move them into my public area. This is blasphemy, but it's just for testing. I'll definitely figure it out. And I'll come here, and I'm just going to get rid of this. Registration.m standard should be 1. I mean, standard should be 3. Should be 1. Should be 1 as well. That's 3, 4, 5. I'm just going to make it very clear what these are. Number of sreg -t. Number of Greg, G-R-E-G, Greg, regs, Greg, and Greg. Control B to bold. And then I'm going to do Control R. Number of registration 3, number of student 1, number of Greg 1. And that's correct, 3, 4, 5. And okay, now I'm just going to go to my terminal. Why did I open up Teams, dude? I'm going to go into my terminal. I'm going to do get status. Oi, 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 oi. Guest. So oh, it's the same thing, just .h, right? .h, yeah. Made the, that's wrong. Completed the QMetaObject pattern. Git push. Git status. And that's it for today. Well, for now at least. I need to go just do something else for a while. And I'll come back to all of that. Wait, no. Go back to the application. Stop it. End that. Where's my UML? And as you see, we don't get any errors. Well, that's all, folks.